Perfect.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm Mark McDonald, COO for 8Quanta. As I said, I'd like to welcome you, but also thank you for the time, spending the time with us today. As you may already know, we're very excited that we announced 8Quanta's partnership with Rossum this past Monday. Rossum specializes in IDP, intelligent document processing, and using their advanced AI solution, and that technology coupled with our experience and knowledge of a NetSuite, we're already driving benefits for our customer base. Together, we felt the timing was right to host this educational webinar. Please view it as a knowledge transfer event. We're here to aid your understanding of AI and specifically how it can help streamline transactional processes. At this time, I'd ask if you have any questions, you submit them in chat through the Teams app or save until the end of the presentation, and we'll certainly have time at the end to address any questions in person. So without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Gabriel Martin from Rossum, who'll be able to help us all an understanding of AI and IDP. Gabby, take it away.
All righty. Thank you so much, Mark. I'm also joined by my colleague, James. Thank you guys again for taking time out of the busy week. Also, just a disclaimer, we'll be able to send the deck out and the recording out, so don't feel like you need to hurry and take notes or anything like that. And like Mark said, we're happy to continue on the conversation after and answer any questions that you have. So James and I put a presentation together for you guys today. So what I'll do is share my screen with you. If you could just give me a thumbs up that you can see it, that would be great. Wonderful. Awesome, guys. And as Mark alluded to, we are now official partners, and we're really, really excited about the joint solution that we have together. We thought it would be important for us to introduce you all to what IDP really is and make you more aware of how you can use it internally within your business. Like Mark said also, this is more for educational purposes. Since we are partners, we want to make sure that there's a knowledge transfer back and forth. So we're here as AI consultants for you all today. So today we'll be talking about one of the biggest buzzwords over the last few years, artificial intelligence, or AI. And to a lot of you, this might mean ChatGPT. This might mean your kids using AI to write their college essays, or it could simply mean automation. While there are endless forms and shapes of artificial intelligence, today we'll be discussing a particular category of AI called intelligent automation. So what defines this category of AI? It's the use of AI to automate repetitive tasks. So this could mean calculations, taking orders, or even filing information and organizing it. Companies are investing in intelligent automation to streamline these tedious and simple processes, which in turn reduces overhead costs and improves efficiency across the entire business. Now, as you can imagine, there are many different types of repetitive tasks that can be automated. But today, we'll focus on IDP, Intelligent Document Processing, which you see in the green square on the bottom left of your screen. So today, we'll be talking about what IDP is, why it matters to your business, what types of companies this works for, and how you choose the right IDP vendor for your business. So, what is Intelligent Document Processing, or IDP? If you think about it, every business is receiving and generating and sending endless amounts of documents every single day. Invoices, bills, claims, credit notes, receipts. What IDP is the act of automating the manual processing of documents and moving the information into a downstream system, such as NetSuite, for example. I think to really showcase what IDP is, we'll first take a look at what it is not. So I'll walk through an entire example with you guys. For the sake of the example, we'll name our employee Mark. So Mark has to monitor an email inbox for all incoming documents, constantly refreshing incoming mail, making sure none of the documents got lost in spam, and also making sure that there aren't any incoming documents in the physical mailbox as well. A lot of companies are still receiving a lot of their documents via mail. Christian needs to, or Mark needs to, make sure that they are the right documents, the dates are correct, and that there aren't duplicates or any attempts at fraud. This can lead to Mark having to reach out to the sender of the document and do some back and forth exception handling. Then, once Mark has identified it's the right document, it's time to manually enter in all of the information by looking at one screen and typing it into another screen. And what's funny is many customers that I have talked to in the past were even using a ruler on their monitor to make sure that they weren't losing their place in all of the line items that they were manually typing in. As you can imagine, this is where most errors occur. One of our customers actually, before they came to Rossum, one of the employees had typed in 1 million instead of 100,000. And this error wasn't actually caught for about 6 months, which led to many problems throughout the business. At this point, Mark might need to match incoming documents with what's in the downstream system. So for example, matching all incoming invoices with all internal purchase orders to make sure that there's no variance in the data. This can also lead to a back and forth with the sender of the document to make sure everything's correct. Finally, once Mark has made sure everything's correct, that there are no errors, he can either send it into an approval workflow or finally post it to the ERP system. Now, for an employee who has been doing this for a long time, it typically takes around 5 minutes or so. 5 minutes may not seem like a long period of time, but think about companies who are processing 50,000 documents, 60,000 documents, 70,000 documents, and growing year over year. So where does intelligent document processing come in? IDP would automate the process of receiving the documents, checking it, extracting it, matching it, and then posting it to a downstream system. On average, this takes about 30 seconds, and that's even if a human needs to be involved. So what does it look like to use IDP? So here I'll walk you through a very high-level overview of how Rossum works. So let's say a sales order gets sent via email. Rossum will automatically pull the document from the email inbox into the Rossum platform. Rossum will check for duplicates. It'll get rid of spam documents. It'll divide and separate the documents and even sort them in a particular category that you guys can decide on. The AI then takes its learnings from the millions of documents that it's seen before and is able to extract the key fields that the business needs. Rossum can then match that extracted information with information in the downstream system to make sure that there's no variance in the data and to double check that everything is 100% accurate. Once confirmed, the information will be posted to the downstream system or even available as a flat file to download. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have seen technology like this or heard about technology like this. So I want to make clear the difference between OCR and IDP. OCR stands for optical character recognition. So what that means is this technology allows a computer to scan a document and pull data that it recognizes. Oftentimes, this is a template-based approach where the end user is actually required to map out where everything is on that specific format of a document before the template-based approach can actually start reading it. Now, this does save time because a portion of the process is automated, but there's still a lot of human interaction and manual work that needs to be done. Versus IDP, or intelligent document processing, which I just showed you an example of, which uses a mix of AI, machine learning, and OCR. This makes it possible for the software to understand what it's reading and make informed decisions about how to structure and organize the data and actually learn over time and improve. So with that being said, why does it matter to your business? Why should you care? Or why should you be excited about this? So thinking back to the example of Mark spending around 5 minutes to process one document, let's think about the people-related challenges here. The first one being, because it's such a manual process, it's fully error-prone. Every step of the way, there's an attempt or there could be a way for an error to be produced. Number two, it's expensive to hire full-time employees to come in and do this manual, tedious task. It's also not a scalable solution. Companies would have to hire more and more full-time employees to get this task done as their company continues to grow. And most importantly, it takes up a lot of Mark's time when he can be doing much more valuable things for the company as opposed to typing things into a different screen. Now we'll take a look at the process-related challenges. By taking so long to process incoming documents, the business isn't able to see up-to-date data. For example, even a delay in revenue recognition. On top of that, because processing manually takes so long, businesses are missing out on early payment discounts or even starting to acquire late fees because it takes so long to actually get a document through and processed. And because it's extremely error-prone, employees are having to spend even more time going back and fixing mistakes that weren't caught in the beginning. So what does IDP or automation unlock for businesses who are having these problems? Number one, productivity and accuracy. With automation, there's faster data entry with minimized errors, and it's a scalable solution. The second would be protection against document-based risk. Last year, 72% of businesses were victims of fraudulent payment attempts. Software like Rossum can help protect against fraud by data matching, which is a double check to make sure everything's accurate, approval workflows, so making sure that the department heads or anyone in particular approves of the information and make sure it's correct, or even duplicate detection, making sure companies aren't sending the same invoice 5 or 6 times and getting paid on all of those. And lastly, improved relationships with business partners. So by automating this process, it minimizes delays, it provides clean, clear, up-to-date data, and it allows businesses to solve issues much faster. And James, I can pass it over to you.
Great. Sounds great. So could we flip to, thank you. So what this looks like in an actual practical application, I've had the fortune of working with organizations that have gone from requiring or really processing documents either manually or leveraging a legacy OCR-based solution to really thinking about the entire cadence of their document processing and applying that automation across from the beginning that you receive the document through how it's processed today. This is one example where, independent of scale, a lot of organizations, if you're processing these documents manually, can benefit from an IDP-like solution. So here in this one case, this is in essence like it's a wholesaler or a distribution organization that had a total of, I think it was 7 total FTEs focusing on manual data entry. One of the main challenges, or what spurred them into looking into automation, was the fact that they were having a huge amount of growth. They were left with a crossroads where they were going to need to hire to maintain the type of velocity of processing their documents, or they would invest in something that was previously a pretty scary word, which is automation. What they ultimately ended up deciding to do was implement an IDP solution. Thankfully, that was Rossum on our end. And what they found was not only were they saving time of processing their total volume, which was 30,000 documents per year, but their overall accuracy, or reducing the errors now that they've implemented automation from the beginning through the end, increased. They were no longer processing duplicate payments. They were keeping their vendors up to date just based on the fact that as an invoice or any of their documents moved down the life cycle of the trajectory of paying out this invoice, vendors were kept up to date, and they were able to catch basically all the sanity errors they didn't have before, meaning things like total times quantity amount, or like we're not adding up, or drawing down, expenditure from multiple invoices to a single PO, all linked up into NetSuite. So ultimately, it's a lot more than just saving folks from the monotonous data entry. There were larger business impacts they had that also helps them keep up with their continued growth. So organizations run the gamut. In this case, it was a little bit smaller, but of course, this benefit scales up all the way. The benefit that you're going to see scales up just by the nominal number of pages that you're going to need to read and enter in. Happy to elaborate on it, any of that. So if you have questions, please throw them into the chat. I'm happy to expand on it.
Perfect. Thank you, James. So now that you have an idea of what IDP is, what it means, how to use it in your company, and why it matters to you, we want to prime you guys with the knowledge to go out and look for a vendor besides potentially just us. So you might be thinking, how do I find the right AI vendor? So I've broken this down into green flags and red flags. So let's take a look at the green flags, what to look for when you're speaking with IDP vendors. The first being they take security seriously. Always ask questions surrounding where your data is being stored, who has access to it, and what security certifications they have in place. For example, ISO and SOC 2. The second would be they allow you to have access to a sandbox environment. So make sure to ask if you're able to upload your documents and get your hands on the platform itself. This way, you know that the teams aren't providing you with false results, and you can also use the user interface yourself to make sure it fits your team's specific needs. The last green flag is make sure they have control over how their AI is trained. And it's not trained by a public cloud, meaning it's much more accurate because they're secure in how it is trained. So now we'll take a look at the red flags, so things to potentially stay away from. The first being limited flexibility. There aren't any customization options, there's very few integration options, and you're not able to really customize it to fit your current workflow's needs. The second would be a template-based approach. Typical template-based solutions don't actually learn or improve on your documents. It's the same accuracy that you'll get from day 1 to day 365. And it requires a human to map out where everything is on that specific layout of the document before it can start extracting the information. The last red flag would be a lack of transparency. So there are many companies that take your documents, send your data off to a team potentially out of the country, and you aren't able to see who's looking at your data, how they're extracting the information, how they're processing it, or if there were even any checks to make sure it was accurate. Internally, we call that a black box approach because it's like you're sending it out to a black box and getting information back. Hopefully that's helpful. Of course, we'll send this deck to you guys so you can take a look at that as you start to have these conversations.
Having real world experience in working, if we could go back to those flags, Gabby, having real world experience working with organizations and folks that have explored IDP, I'm fortunate to have had these intro conversations and get a lay of the land as to what's out there, right? OCR, IDP, all the lovely buzzwords, AI, you name it. One ironic red flag that I would caution everyone about is what would be a definitive red flag for me, I suppose, that would indicate that you're talking to an OCR vendor versus IDP, is an over obsession on accuracy on data being extracted. Because if we were to distill down the two separate approaches, IDP is holistic automation, meaning how do we configure the full rule sets to receive a document and touchlessly process that, while that encompasses accurate extraction. So we're finding the variable or the fields on the page, but beyond that, what we want to do is configure or do that flexibility to ensure that everything on there is exactly the way that it's supposed to be, and that we could validate that. All of that additional human effort related to flexibly ensuring that the data is valid. If you don't have that, and your solution is very OCR centric, the only thing that you would be then talking about is, well, if you tell us where the data is, we'll definitely pull it off. So I just want to be clear, that element is a solved problem, but it's almost something you need to have in mind, or something that you need to know going into the conversation to really start to unpack whether or not the solution should provide broader impact, broader automation for you to process your documents. I hope that bit of clarity is helpful. Gabby, we do have a question in the comment around how long implementation takes. Perhaps we tackle that later, or is that something that you want to tackle?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you guys understand what next steps look like. If you want to further the conversation, please, if you have any questions today, throw them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them now. But if you don't want to do that, definitely reach out to Mark and he can get you in touch with us, or feel free to reach out to us directly. I also have a few links for you here. So the first link is a free trial. You're able to click on it, sign up with your email address, and start uploading documents into it to test it yourself. The second would be additional customer stories. So being able to filter by industry or by region or anything like that, you're able to really see stories that are relevant for you and your business. And the last would be scheduling a platform demo. If you want to see how our product works, if you want to ask more questions and then see it for yourself, absolutely use that link to schedule some time with us. And now we can dive into questions.
So James, I think we had one question, like you said, which was what does the implementation take? That was from Brian. I don't know whether you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to. So as I'm fortunate to, what I want to be mindful of, team, is I'm fortunate enough to work at an AI-based IDP provider. And that's a lot of acronyms and buzzwords for just simply meaning that Rossum specifically is at the forefront of reducing the burden to implement a solution like this on the core extraction and data validation piece. Partners of ours, like 8Quanta, handle the other component, which is the mechanical integration components with NetSuite. They are experts in that domain. When you set up a business to start automating the full end-to-end document process, I would say there are different times to value as you think about the entire steps. If you are not looking at an AI-based OCR solution to identify variables, it can be very time-consuming just based on simple attributes where you may need to brute force templates to identify where different data points exist on an invoice. So basically forcing the machine to look for certain data points on a page where you believe they think that they are. That approach has no problem if you have a small number of invoices, or by extension, a small variety of invoices. If you have a limited amount of suppliers with consistent formats, it's really not an issue to set up standard templates very, very quickly to extract the data that you need. As you increase variability and different formats, this becomes an untenable process. Now, scaling that up to something like Rossum, being the fact that it's an AI-based solution, if we're talking about data extraction, it comes with a pre-trained model to already identify all of the common attributes that you would find on your invoices. So getting time to value of identifying the data that appears on an invoice and training a production level model to do this at scale and in production can be a matter of hours to days. Now, that's just extraction. Where a lot of the implementation time takes is the configuration of your rule sets, understanding your business process. Again, a lot of the strength that 8Quanta provides, for instance. How do we need to integrate this to your downstream system? And what is the validation criteria that we're going to care about as we process those invoices? We need to think of all of those different exceptions, because the more exceptions that you bake into the platform and you test, the more likely it is that you're going to have the nirvana, which is straight through processing, should it clear all of the different considerations. I'm going to end with this, Brian. The full project typically takes between 2 to 3 months. But again, most of that is business rule configuration and integration work versus, at least in our domain, training the system to appropriately identify the different elements that are on the page. I hope that was helpful. I'm more than happy to expand on that. Mark, a lot of this I think falls in your domain as well. How about you talk? I'd love to pass it over to you to talk through how you expedite some of that implementation process with your expertise around, say, NetSuite or different ERPs.
Yeah, so thank you for that, James. And you touched on a lot of the core points that I would have mentioned as well. I think the first thing to do, Brian, is we'd sit down with the team and understand what your needs are specifically. And those needs are all encompassing, not just the documentation types that you look to process, but how they should be processed, what rule set we develop, as we said in the Rossum tool. But then what's the downstream input of the data that we then push into NetSuite? How do you want it to perform? Do you want it to create payments? Do you want it to apply payments? Do you want it to match invoices? And that matching process and that reconciliation activity, if you like, that's where the integration and the configuration, the core configuration within NetSuite occurs with custom code that we develop. So that in itself, as James alluded to, probably 2 to 3 months activity, depending upon the complexity of that integration need. But certainly you should be able to realize benefits certainly within that 2 to 3 month period. Did that answer your question, Brian? We did take you off mute. Hopefully so. Any other questions out there at all? I didn't see any more on chat, Susie, I don't think, no.
Nope, I didn't either.
Another question that we get pretty often is, what document types does Rossum in particular process? So where we see the most value are transactional documents that occur from, like the name, transactions, which is nice because all different industry types, all different regions, all different businesses produce transactions, and there's always multiple documents around that. These are also typically structured or semi-structured documents. So if you have any question about, hey, I think I have a use case for this, I'm not sure if it falls in that category, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the 8Quanta team or the Rossum team, and we're happy to take a look at it with you and see if we can provide you time savings and value.
Another question that we often get, at least in the domain that I exist in, so I suppose my perspective is a little bit slanted in a way, but often it is, what is the total amount of support or resources that we need to maintain an automation solution? Oftentimes when we work with organizations or IDP is brought in the finance department, while it is low-hanging fruit and quite accessible at this point, it's still daunting, as it's typically one of the first automation projects that are brought on. When we think about red flags and green flags, OCR, or brute force methods to apply automation, requires a larger support staff related to technical resources or an IT team. That's historically been the approach for a lot of vendors that have taken more rigid technology and slowly applied this type of rigid technology to do automation. The benefits of the modern players that are out there are that it's really user-centric and line of business focused, where most of the solutions have eliminated a huge amount of the complexity for ongoing maintenance, where IT eventually leaves this project, and by virtue of a correct implementation, the system is self-improving along with the type of support that you're going to receive from the different partners. But I just want to be very clear that oftentimes it sounds more daunting than it is, and folks that might not have an IT team to rely on, they can still certainly get automation or take on an IDP project, as long as they have the correct partners and a team that's dedicated to this. And that team can be up to only 2 or 3 people, depending upon the will to get it done. Not impacting total timelines, Brian.
And I think, James, just to add to that, those that headcount brought into to handle this activity is more than offset by the savings you'd see with the reduced manual activity of data entries to start with, as well as the improved accuracy you're going to get as well.
And you touch on accuracy as well. I think the ultimate that a lot of organizations need to answer is, when is it right to implement automation? There are a lot of competing priorities out there. Why would you prioritize purchase AP, AR, or any document-based transaction as part of something that you'd want to do and engage with third parties? I would caution to not let the main focal point always fall down onto, well, it's time to hire, right? I think oftentimes it becomes quite apparent that automation can solve broader organizations. If you're looking to outcomes that are similar to, how do we get early payment incentives? How do we reduce the overall errors that we're passing? Or the unknowns, which flatly could be, I don't know how many duplicate payments we're processing. I don't know how many errors that we're processing through because it's not systematic. So it doesn't need to be obvious. It needs to be something. Well, our current team is a total of 2 or 3 people, and then someone goes on vacation and suddenly there's a huge crunch. There are other opportunities by implementing automation as opposed to just time savings, which is something that I would encourage every organization out there to take an inventory of very quickly, and if it's going to be a priority for you to implement.
Wonderful.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Oh, there we go. There's one.
So we got one question there. If you want to scan multiple vendor bills into NetSuite vendor bill record, regardless of the design of the paper bill, how do you map those paper bills to match the NetSuite field? So again, that would be down to the configuration set within Rossum, which would take the data and the relevant fields that it identifies and pushes them into the corresponding NetSuite fields that we build within a custom table. And again, that doesn't need to be done for every document, because Rossum has the intelligence of being able to recognize that a document is an invoice, and it knows what information it needs to pull from that, be it the vendor name, address, the value, the items, the date, all of the key data fields. It already knows what to look for on documents and how that data is typically structured, so it would identify it without having to be pre-programmed for every single format of invoice you're going to get. Another question for you, James, I think, from Alosha. You mentioned 2 to 3 people being involved in implementation processes. What about when the implementation is done? Do you still need those people to oversee the process?
It's a great question. So the reason why I started with 2 is because there are traditionally 2 very clear lines of delineation. And I would say that is 2 is the most common low amount of individuals involved. You can have a single person, but if you break it out into 2 logical components to get the system stood up, you typically have a downstream system of record expert. So a NetSuite admin, in the case that we're going to be implementing NetSuite, that would handle the integration process, or some representative that understands how to pull validation data in from your downstream sources of truth. That is not an ongoing function. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but the second would be the process owner. Someone understands what is the data needs to validate of the data that comes across on the system. Typically, that's someone that is the director of AP, finance director or manager, someone in the business can make decisions in the firm and be the artist. Receive this invoice. These are the fields that we need to capture, and these are all the different configurations of logic that we need to map out to ensure that this invoice is appropriate once we've received it. Once implementation has been completed, as you can appreciate, you've done the configuration and done the integration to your downstream systems and mapped out the different fields and the logical points of connectivity. So that individual that might be the NetSuite admin rolls off, he never needs to come back. There's no additional upkeep, at least from our perspective here at Rossum. That may be different in other solutions, particularly OCR solutions. When it comes to the original process owner, like the director of accounting, you name it, that individual can roll off as well. If that person was originally involved in just literally processing those invoices, at least from the Rossum perspective, they would still technically be involved, but at a much, much less hands-on approach. So again, when we talk about Rossum outcomes or just IDP outcomes, the whole idea through automation is if you were to receive 100 invoices a day, let's just pretend, or a month, whatever, you'd only need to resolve or triage 3 errors that might occur, right? Because 97 of them sail through and it's exactly what you would have anticipated. So often what that means is a reduction in individuals focused on inputting data. And if we've done our job spectacularly, no one's even logging into Rossum. It's just working in the background as long as you're receiving appropriate documents. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
No problem.
So I don't see any more questions coming through. I know we had a few people join late, but just for their information, we will send out a link to the recording as well as the copy of the PowerPoint slide, or shall we say the PDF slides. At this time, Gabby James, I'd certainly like to thank you for the education and insights you brought to the table. I know I personally learn something from you guys every time we interact, so very much appreciate that, and definitely looking forward to furthering our partnership. Just an FYI for everybody out there, 8Quanta and Rossum are developing a suite app. It's called AID, 8Quanta AID app. That will be available shortly. You'll soon see that posted out on NetSuite's App Store. So we're really looking forward to that development, and hope everybody else has a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.